Bună ziua! Vă mulțumesc încă o dată că sunteți alături de noi astăzi, bine după orele dimineții. E cred că prima oară când avem un webinar programat după amiaza și sper că acest lucru nu este un inconvenient. Astăzi vom vorbi despre cum putem să facem transportul public local atractiv și alături de noi sunt doi vorbitori, cărora le mulțumesc de pe acum că au acceptat așa de repede invitația noastră. Primul vorbitor va fi Vanessa Holve de la TRT Italia, care a fost implicată și coordonează și lucrează la noul ghid tematic pentru planurile de mobilitate urbană, care se adresează exact acestui subiect despre cum facem atractiv transportul public local. Acest ghid tematic încă nu este în versiunea finală, este în versiunea de draft, dar Vanessa vă va spune mai multe detalii care sunt următorii pași și care este conținutul acestui ghid. Și al doilea vorbitor al zilei de astăzi este András EKÉS de la MOBILISSIMUS Budapesta, Ungaria, care va vorbi despre lucruri mult mai concrete, despre exemple aplicate din diverse orașe, proiecte în care ei au fost implicați. Înainte de a începe, însă vreau să fac două anunțuri foarte importante. În luna iunie vom mai avea două activități, una în format fizic și una în format online. În 23-24 iunie vom avea un training online pentru studenți, proaspeți absolvenți și tineri specialiști, nu doar din administrația publică, ci și din ONG-uri, care sunt pasionați de mobilitatea urbană și tema acestui training va fi incluziune și accesibilitate în spațiul public. Iar în 28 iunie vom avea un workshop de incubare la București, o acțiune organizată în comun de Civitas Initiative și EIT Urban Mobility, primul astfel de eveniment care se desfășoară în România cu suportul CIVINET România și la care încă vă mai puteți înscrie până mâine. Pentru Future Leaders, deci pentru trainingul pentru tineri, încă nu am lansat înscrierile, mâine dimineață, deci dacă vă uitați pe social media CIVINET România, de mâine dimineață veți găsi linkul unde vă puteți înscrie, iar pentru pentru workshopul de incubare de la București din 28 iunie, vă mai puteți înscrie astăzi și mâine, trimițând un mail la civinet-romania@civitas.eu și am să vă înscriu eu, pentru că oficial perioada de înscriere oarecum s-a încheiat și de aceea formularul de înscriere este blocat în momentul de față. Deci civinet-romania@civitas.eu. Și acum am făcut o introducere destul de lungă. Am să o rog pe Vanessa să înceapă prima prezentare. Vanessa nu va putea sta pe parcursul întregului webinar alături de noi, de aceea vă rog, dacă aveți întrebări, să le scrieți în chat pentru a le putea adresa la finalul întrebării. Vanessa, please, you have the floor. You have the screen. Vanessa, you are muted.
There, I'm unmuted, sorry. I shared my screen too quickly. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for the invitation, Violetta. It's my pleasure to be with you this afternoon. So I'm Vanessa Holve. I'm a policy and project advisor at TRT. So it's an Italian transport consultancy, and TRT is part of a project of Civitas Elevate, which coordinates all the Civitas projects, including the CIVINET Romania. And as part of this project,
acestui proiect, am fost însărcinați de Comisia Europeană să redactăm
material on sustainable mobility plans. So part of Elevate, Civitas Elevate, we drafted last year SUMP Topic guide on micromobility. So the safe use of micromobility devices in areas. And as part of the project, we've been asked recently to draft another guidance on how to make public transport even more attractive. So I will share my screen now and take you through a few slides. I don't know if you can see it now. Yeah, good. So first of all, I'll present you with the context and the objectives of this topic guide. Then we will address the content and the approach to draft it, and then we'll go through the next steps. So the content, yeah, I think we can all agree that we need to relaunch public transport after COVID. And well, public transport, you know, lost users, but more importantly, it lost revenues. And even now that we are in the so-called post-pandemic era, many factors still slow down the return of the users, such as teleworking, the preference still for private vehicles, let it be cars, but also we've seen bicycles and micromobility devices. And so the challenge is to get the trust back and the passengers back on public transport, with the goal to increase its market share again. But also so we're gaining the previous users, but also using that opportunity to attract new users. So we also know the energy crisis that was triggered by the Russian invasion of Ukraine has put even more emphasis on the importance of energy efficient transport modes like public transport. So to conclude on this context, I say that both the pandemic but also the energy crisis are new challenges, but also opportunities to reimagine mobility in cities, and where both the Commission and I think the whole sector wants to put the citizens at the center of this. So public transport and SUMPs, it's a long history. Obviously, public transport is an essential component in the preparation and implementation of SUMPs. It has always been, but maybe not enough, because we haven't managed to achieve a modal shift away from the car to public transport that is high enough, especially now in the context of COVID. So the European Commission wishes to put public transport back as the backbone of sustainable transport networks. And in this sense, I would just like to flag up that public transport is actually reflected as a fundamental principle of SUMPs. You might know this beautiful wheel. I call it the camembert, which is a French cheese. So I call it the SUMPs camembert. I'm French, that's why. But so yeah, it's very well reflected in this nice wheel, which proposes 12 steps to plan when you design your SUMP. So some guidelines on how to make a good SUMP. You might know it already, otherwise I highly recommend you to check it. This SUMP topic guide we are working on will be drafted from the perspective of the planners. I'm sure many of you are planners, and this is our target audience. It's not the Commission. Actually, it's not so much the operators, it's the planners. How can you better integrate public transport in your SUMP to make it more attractive? So that is an important aspect. It's not yet another publication on public transport. It has this link with SUMPs, with planning specifically. And it will be part of this compendium of European guidelines for SUMPs, I would really encourage you to check this ELTIS website, the Urban Mobility portal, ELTIS, where you can see there's loads of topic guides, but also practitioner briefings. So topic guides are documents that are about 40-50 pages on quite comprehensive guidance material on a specific topic, while practitioner briefings are a bit shorter documents and more on cutting-edge topics such as urban air mobility, drones, for instance. So more innovative topics, and they are shorter. The topic guides are quite detailed, and this what we are talking about now is indeed a topic guide. I think you can see the, okay, this is better. We aim with this document to provide guidance for those involved in public transport. So as I said, it's for planners, but also decision makers, consultants, like me, who support the cities. And we also want to help cities in achieving this modal shift, so towards active modes. And I'm sure in Romania, this is also a goal of many cities. It would be good to hear about it afterwards, how you manage to achieve this modal shift. And that can be achieved through better planning. So we hope this guide will help. And the other goal is to support the implementation of this European strategy. Maybe you heard about a urban mobility framework. The 14th of December, the Commission published this big strategy. And in there, it says public transport is the backbone of the mobility system. And every strategy, every transport strategy now in the coming years needs to reflect that and be aligned with this European framework. And of course, this topic guide also is in line with the Green Deal objectives. So this EU strategy on greening all the sectors, including public transport. Okay, do I speak too quickly, Christian, or is it okay? No? Regarding the content, a bit more details on this. But as I told Violetta, the topic is not finished yet. It's a draft. It's currently with the European Commission for final check. So either it all goes well and it stays more or less like it is now, or the Commission could say, no, we want another priority. So yeah, the content might still change. I hope not too much though, but let's see. But this is what I'm going to present you a bit more with what is in there currently. So the topic guide addresses ways to make public transport more attractive through SUMPs to trigger this shift. People need to want to take public transport more. The first part introduces this concept of attractiveness and the importance of including it in SUMPs much better. And the part deals with specific issues related to public transport planning. You will see more in my next slides. We also propose 15 key messages on this topic and many good practice examples from Europe, but also beyond. So there's a lot of case studies throughout the document. So going a bit more into detail into the content, the first chapter starts with understanding the current service quality and demand. This is the basis, and this is also in this camembert, in this nice cycle you've seen before from the European SUMP guidelines. So you need to assess what is your current situation with public transport. And how is it going? And there you have lots of tools. You have data, you have key performance indicators. So all these tools at your disposal to assess the current situation are featured in the document. And that then helps you to understand the actual needs of both the users, but also, as important, the non-users, the potential users you can still attract. And that's what we want with this topic guide. The second chapter looks at taking an integrated approach to public transport planning. So how to integrate, for instance, network planning, prices, tariffs, and operations. But it also looks, and this is a very important feature aspect of this topic guide, is how to connect the city better with the peri-urban and rural areas. So the Commission, the European Commission, in its urban mobility framework, it has put a great emphasis on this connection with beyond the city boundaries. And this is very much reflected in this topic guide. How can we, with the use of, for instance, intermodal hubs at the border of the city, with the use of shared mobility services, with the use of on-demand mobility services, how can we reach out for a certain segment of users, like the commuters? In many cities in Europe, people live outside the city and commute into the city, and this is the reason for the congestion. So how to connect better these commuters with the city so that they don't use their cars. And this is a challenge in so many cities still. So we put a strong emphasis on this. And then we try to give advice on how to improve governance. So for instance, one recommendation is to have a single regulatory authority for transport. So to centralize management of transport. This is the case in, for instance, Transport for London. I don't know if you know, many cities, I know also in Budapest, I think it is the case to have a single regulatory authority. These are just little examples of these chapters. The document is 43 pages long. The third chapter addresses then, once you've understood the situation, once you've understood the needs, and you had a look at a whole city network approach and how to connect with the periphery, then we look at how to improve the quality of the service. And there we identified frequency of public transport, reliability, on-call services, also speed, the accessibility for all, for persons with reduced mobility, but also from a wider perspective. Comfort is very important, also inside the stations, in the fleet, but also in the station. We also recommend to take a much more gender equal approach, to look much more at women, the needs of women. We saw, for instance, during COVID, that during the pandemic, that most users still using public transport were women, because they were the teachers who still had to go and teach. They were the ones, the nurses, who still had to go to the hospital. And so having a much more gender-focused approach is crucial. Affordability is even so crucial. For instance, now that people work from home and don't use public transport on a daily basis, but want just to go to work twice per week, or during off-peak times, how do you accommodate this new pattern? We also recommend to reallocate road space much more to public transport and not so much to the cars. And this is really in the hands of the planners, how to, for instance, develop segregated, dedicated bus lanes for public transport. And we also recommend to use much more new technologies and apps. So this is what public transport operators do already, but to encourage, make most use of it also for planning for new routes, to identify via tracking devices which routes are needed for the future, and to provide also safe and secure services. And this is the precondition for transport, and we tend to sometimes forget it, but to insist, especially during COVID times, for you know, social distancing, to reassure the users that it's safe to travel by public transport. And last but not least, we have our last chapter, because I realize I'm taking longer than I thought, is on how to market, how to make the image of public transport more sexy. And this is not easy. So it's about creating an attractive identity about it, making it fun. So involving the citizens in, for instance, shaping how should this public transport stop look like, or so it provides lots of best practice examples also from Nordic countries. But we also put in that chapter financial sustainability, so sustainability and identity. So to make ensure that even in crisis like the pandemic, that you can still finance your system. And that has been a huge challenge. So to diversify your funding and come up with innovative financing. So the document proposes some avenues in that regard, and of course resilience, how to survive in such crisis. And you know, the pandemic is one of them. There is the climate crisis, so have much more contingency plans and measures to be more proactive and not reactive to such crises. The document also lists 15 key messages on planning.
Și 15 mesaje cheie privind planificarea, practic o sinteză a documentului. Voi trece repede prin ele. Evaluarea situației actuale, după cum am menționat.
Monitoring, anticipating the need. There's a clear link to the TNT urban nodes also in the document, because this is also in line with EU strategies. I mentioned the whole city approach to public transport planning. To widen the scope of your SUMP, to take into account, as I said, the connection beyond the city, with on-demand mobility. For instance, I also mentioned here mobility as a service is one of those solutions to use to connect with the peri-urban and rural areas. The next recommendations are, for instance, better governance, as I mentioned, with a single regulatory authority, and to have a horizontal cooperation to all the sectors, health, education, leisure, but while planning and implementing public transport. Good quality mobility options, extremely important. That's the feedback we received. And adapting the infrastructure, the fleet, to accessibility from a wider perspective, as I mentioned before, and tailor the needs to tailor the services to the needs. So less frequent commutes that do not justify, for instance, a monthly subscription. This is repeating very much what I said. This is really the list as they appear now. No doubt they will change, as I said, but this is how we would like them to appear. So about decarbonization, I didn't mention that before. There is a chapter on this, though the focus is not on decarbonizing. Providing a clean public transport is something that makes it attractive, but is not the main criteria for people to take public transport, but we recommend to follow this avoid, shift, improve principle. So to avoid unnecessary traffic, shift to the transport mode, sustainable ones, and improve then each mode in itself. And then we also, another important point is to align your mobility plan priorities for public transport with those of CCAPs. So these sustainable energy climate action plans. So many cities also via the Covenant of Mayors, for instance, develop climate action plans and energy action plans. And so it's important to have a harmonization between the plans, to even better to integrate them, but if not possible, to ensure some consistency, and that public transport strategies are aligned between the two plans. And safety and security, as I mentioned, that are the sine qua non condition for travel, with a focus on children and vulnerable users. Road space reallocation, I touched upon it, where also it's important to ensure the connection with cycling and walking and shared mobility services. So when dedicating this infrastructure, it's important to keep that in mind. Yeah, more use of new technologies, for instance, multimodal information and ticketing are crucial to boost the use of public transport, and resilience, as I mentioned. And finally, the sustainability of public transport. We suggest, for instance, new financing models like land value capture. For instance, well, that was an example in London. There are other ones how local businesses contribute to financing the development of public transport infrastructure. So those businesses that are located on a new route, public transport route, contribute because they will get a benefit of having users coming along that route. Then they all contribute financially to the financing of this route. So this is a principle that is a public-private partnership. It's not that easy to put in place, but happens in some cities. And so we look into green bonds, for instance, how green bonds can finance, help finance public transport. And I mentioned this attractive identity, both in and around the stations and on the vehicle. So because people want to relax, they want to have Wi-Fi to be able to work on public transport. They want to be able to go shopping around public transport facilities. So all this should be taken into account. I'm reaching the end of my presentation. So the approach to draft this topic guide, well, it's a coordinated approach. We involved a group. I didn't draft that on my own, obviously. It was a group of 5 experts that were selected together with the European Commission. These are UITP, I guess you know it, the European Passenger Federation, the University of Berlin, the city of Gdynia in Poland, and the transport operator of Gothenburg. And they worked together with DG Move and CINEA and us to draft this. We also had the involvement of a larger group of stakeholders, which includes the European Cyclist Federation, for instance, the European Passenger Transport Operators, Polis, the city network, other cities like Malmö, Toulouse, but also Amsterdam, Karlsruhe transport operator, and there was also a few more stakeholders. So we organized 2 working group meetings and 1 stakeholder workshop. And then there was a public consultation, which already closed. We tried to disseminate it as wide as possible via LTIS and Civitas that closed last month. And so during this public consultation, and you can still see it, the topic guide was available on the LTIS website. I've checked, it's still there. Though, unfortunately, I'm sorry, it's not possible to contribute anymore to it, but you can take a glance at it if you wanted it. It's 43 pages. It has changed a little bit since the public consultation, because obviously I consolidated all the input I received. So the final version is expected for July. Yeah, and very briefly on the next step. So as I mentioned, it's currently with the European Commission. It will be published in July. And here, more importantly, and that's where I'd like to address to all of you, we will need to disseminate this best practice, this guidance, and we will do it via Civitas, via the CIVINET, and but also via all your organizations. So we invite you, once it's published, I will share it with Violetta also, to take a look at it and share it widely. So that leads me to the end of my presentation. I would like to thank you for listening so long, and I'm here also for questions.
Thank you very much, Vanessa. Yes, when it's going to be the final version, I would be glad to send to our members. And I hope it's going to be a very helpful tool in planning the SUMPs. Many cities have undergone now a process of revising, of updating their SUMPs, and probably it would be also very helpful. So I have a question up to the moment that there are some others regarding the content of the guidelines. You said at the beginning of the presentation that there is a chapter where we need to understand the needs of the non-users in order to attract them to the public transport. Do we have a methodology or a formula or I don't know?
Well, it gives some indications on how to do consultation of stakeholders, because obviously for the current users, we can use a lot, track the data via the apps, consult them via surveys, but it's more difficult to reach out indeed to the non-users. And there, the topic guide does provide some avenues, such as surveys, such as participatory approaches. Yeah.
Okay, good. So there are some tools that we can use.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you very much. So, any other questions?
I don't know if anybody contributed actually via the public consultation or not.
Did you receive a lot of feedback during the public consultation?
Yes, but a bit less than to the previous one on micromobility. Micromobility did trigger a lot of reactions, I must say, from many sectors. While public transport is a topic that is more traditional, I would say. And we, for this second topic guide, we did have this stakeholder workshop at the beginning of the process, where we already included, it was like a public consultation very early. And there we received a lot of feedback. And we feel that then when the document went to public consultation, proper consultation, we had already most of the key stakeholders' input. So, but yes, we did receive still some very good input.
Okay, that's great. I have a question or a comment. If you switch to English, Christy, can you translate it? Do you see it or I read it? Ați spus că deja în anumite orașe, companiile sunt taxate pe rutele unde circulă mijloace de transport în comun. În oraș, multe companii au între 1 și 5 angajați care lucrează într-un singur schimb. S-a ajuns la un consens sau au fost companiile taxate pur și simplu? I think it was the example from London.
Yeah. I didn't hear, wait, I cannot hear you very well. It's very far away. Wait. Yeah, just the beginning. Yeah. So in the land value capture model, is that correct? Where the businesses contribute along the route? Yeah. I will be very honest. I'm not sure about the details of it. I would say, I don't know if all the companies located along a specific route, if all of them are required, even small companies, small businesses are required to pay, to contribute financially, or if it's voluntary. I'm not aware of that. I think models differ, and it depends obviously on the financial resources of all those companies. But I can mention, I would invite you to check the London model, which is the reference always, is called Crossrail. Cross like crossing, and rail like rail, Crossrail. And it was a train line that crossed the whole of London, and it was a huge project where companies participated financially. Crossrail London, exactly. And so there you have, it stands as the best practice for land value capture. But this is one model among others for public-private partnership. It's one where you need to cooperate very well with the private sector. It's not an easy one, but it is one that can work.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
I see in the chat, I see a few comments in Romanian. If you could read.
Yes, this was the question that...
that was it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes. Okay, if there are no other questions, thank you once again, Vanessa, for your time and your presentation. And I will give the screen to András, if he is still with us. And we are going to see
yeah, I'm here, absolutely.
Examples.
I apologize, I have to go in 10 minutes, you know that, but thank you again for the invitation.
Yes, thank you. And when it's ready, the guidelines, please send it to me and we will disseminate it. So András, can you share your screen and the presentation?
Yes, I will. Sorry. Can you see the presentation mode?
No, not the presentation mode.
Not the presentation mode? Okay.
No.
Just a second. And now?
Yes, it's in presentation mode.
Okay, perfect. So welcome everybody. My name is András EKÉS. I'm Managing Director of MOBILISSIMUS, a sustainable urban mobility planning and consultancy company located in Budapest. And we are absolutely committed to smart, cost-efficient mobility systems. and we developed several SUMPs for Hungarian cities. So I'm very happy that Vanessa gave us a broad overview, also including the importance of SUMPs. So we had an experience on how to motivate cities to develop SUMPs.
Experiență cum să motivăm orașele să elaboreze PMUD-uri și cum să analizeze conținutul acestora. Deci este un document foarte important de bază pentru creșterea atractivității transportului.
We do a lot for awareness raising, also in terms of the SUMP process, also connected to many public transport network and service level improvement process.
András, not so fast, please.
I'm very sorry. Okay, I will be slower, but I will skip, I think, a couple of slides because I have a lot, but if I'm slower, I have to skip. So we did also several network and service planning projects in Hungary and abroad. Also, I will show one from Romania, from Oradea, and I will highlight some issues which might be interesting for you. And I think it will be a quite good complementary part of what Vanessa told and introduced us regarding to her presentation. So I would like to show you some information, but it's partly overlapping to Vanessa's presentation that actually I think it's very important to understand what's happening around us, because the recent years really influenced a lot the demand for public transport. And during the pandemic and even after, public transport authorities, operators suffered a lot of losing passengers. So it's a huge challenge actually how to gain them back or how to get new users. I will show you some concrete examples with real results. And also an actual challenge, Vanessa mentioned it, these are the increasing fuel prices and the actual very huge economic and financial challenges. And what we know that in order to be able to really show a new choice and an alternative and how to address the potential users, we need financially stable, innovative and developing services. And if we do opposite actions, these will keep away clients, for example, cutting back services, increasing the prices. And I think there is a unique opportunity now how to gain back passengers. And there are a lot of planning tools, and I would like to show you some of them. So we have quite a lot of challenges, like the growing motorization. For example, I give you the case that in Budapest and the surrounding county, Pest County, there are around about 3 million citizens. And the last 8 years, there was an increase of the cars by 30%. If we imagine only these extra cars within the 8 years would represent a row from Budapest to Lyon in France. And how and where to put them on the streets? Is there any reason to use them? Obviously, it's an answer from the users, but if we can offer them better alternatives, they will choose sooner or later. And even more, they will choose if we consider this turbulent economic, financial, and political period and the real high impact on fuel prices. But what happens if we don't follow this front-runner opportunity, and the public transport systems run into a spiral, negative spiral? It happened a lot in European cities and mainly in Central Europe, that there were less and less users even before COVID, and less revenues. So what was the answer? Maybe to cut back the service and increase the prices. It was an answer from the users to leave the services, and it produced even less revenues. And with even less revenues, those people used further the public transport who didn't find any alternative. So sometimes retreated people, school children, but who could finance the system itself, partly left and started to use a car, impacting a lot of negative climatic, environmental, economic aspects. So it's a negative spiral and happened a lot in our cities. And our task is now, and I really enjoyed how Vanessa introduced it, is how to gain back passengers. And I asked whether public transport is an option you can choose among other, or it's a must. I think it will be a must. Of course, it's an alternative, but you have to offer very, very attractive solutions, and you will feel that it's really good for you. But somebody has to pay for the services. And this is the big question. For example, if we consider, certainly you've heard about the €9 ticket in Germany, whether it solves the problems or not, and who will pay it for the financing. Can we do something similar in Central Eastern Europe or not? I think not really, because it's really a very, very costly, but really innovative solution. But in case of you have such tickets, for example, you will lose a lot of passengers who don't want to be in a very, very busy train or bus or overloaded ones. And on the other hand, companies will lose the opportunity to get data on the passengers if you have only one ticket and no mobile ticketing or card-based tap-in, tap-out ticketing. So it's a question of data sets, but it's another topic. But anyway, I think that we are in a shortage of financing. As for the Hungarian case, it's really a nightmare how to finance public transport systems. And despite this fact, how to make it more attractive. And I will show you that there are some methods for that. And I think that we have to speak about the new normal in urban mobility and public transport. And it's a crucial question. Do we consider, for example, that the new normal will be something around 70%? This is an example from Budapest showing the main bus lines passenger loading, and 100% was the average of 2019. And now we are around 71, 73%. And it's much better than it was last year, and even better than it was during spring of 2020, but still 25 to 30% passengers are still missing. It's general in Europe, but it's still a very important, maybe a sort of point of no return. So if you can find these lost passengers, for example, because the fuel prices they can't afford anymore, you have to offer really great alternatives. And here is the pair of this former figure. It's for the car use. It has decreased in 2020, but now we are around at the same level than in 2019, but there are around 15% more cars. So it's somehow a decrease if we are at the same amount in terms of percentage. And you can see, for example, the diesel prices, and I don't know how it will be continuing the next months, but still, I think it's a very important factor how to draw the attention of car drivers and how to offer alternatives. So my question is somehow, what will be the new normal in public transport? And for that, I would like to show you some exact actions we did in Mobilissimus the latest years for increasing attractiveness. The first one is a renewal of bus network in Nyíregyháza. Nyíregyháza is a city of 120,000 inhabitants in northeastern Hungary, and they had a quite old-fashioned bus network, easy to operate for the operator and difficult to use for the clients. It's quite typical in Hungary, but I think in many countries in sea circumstances. We started to build up the new network, even we started it before, but due to the pandemic, we had to change the mindset and implement a temporary network, which based the future network we introduced from the August 2020. We created completely new line structure, new lines, longer lines, avoiding extra interchanges, new lines from housing estates to big companies, employers, and also we developed much better services in terms of timetables, so interval-based timetables, much better synchronization among the lines, and we used a visualization and city line designer software for planning the network and the timetable. So, okay, it's a screen actually, but these buses can move in a simulation, and it's very attractive to show to the decision makers. They will understand what you do as a planner or as a consultant. They will understand why is it important to make good harmonization in a common section, why to make interval-based timetable. You can make the interchanges much better than it was before, and it's repeating every hour. We don't have to tell similar issues, for example, in Germany or Switzerland, but we have to tell it in Hungary. And as far as I remember, some Romanian cities, you have similar problems or similar issues to tackle in terms of network and timetable system. You can see how, for example, the timetable layout has changed. So it's really a user-friendly one and much more easy to use it. And we did a lot of communication, awareness raising, a lot of newspapers, TV news, local TV news, and internet-based communication. And also we had brochures, we had posters in many bus stops with the main changes and with the new map, and people could really understand. So we had very positive impacts and feedbacks. More and more people started to use despite the COVID period, meaning that it was a successful project. And what we did, we used the same 72 buses what we had before, but we use it more in an optimized way, and we use it more in a passenger-friendly way. And this is just a very recent part of it. There will be, again, some changes, new lines upon the passenger needs, and new and better connections, and using the onboard unit data sets. We refine the timetables. So we will modify a little bit from the 18th of June. A similar but very small network, maybe you know the city of Siófok at the border of Balaton, Lake Balaton. This is a little system of 6 buses and around 6-7 lines. But what happened before, even during the high summer period, the peak period, there were no connections to the railways. Nevertheless, the railways gave at least a 1-hour interval-based timetable. So every hour, the same minute, you have an intercity train. And there will also trains in between. So we started to plan this network, and the main principle was to make a connection to the railways, and also to make to save on interchanges, so to avoid interchanges. Here you can see for a line, former 64, how it was not connecting to the railways. And you can see the colors that, for example, the green ones are only those which are good for connection, all others not. So it was not easy, not difficult to improve it and create something better. What we did, we developed transversal lines. So from one part of the city, you could travel to the other part. We did a very strong communication together with the operator Volánbusz, like in Nyíregyháza, and with new passenger information system, new timetable structure, new lines, and a strong communication. Also, we did it as Mobilissimus on Facebook and other channels. We could improve the service level, and even more from the beginning of September, because it was introduced in the middle of last summer, but from the school period beginning, we included a new part in the public transport service. So we have new lines with new stops, longer lines. That means some housing and residential areas can get a bus now, and it wasn't the case before. So the last site for this part that I got yesterday, it's in Hungarian, but I got yesterday the last year's revenues. This is the green. Column, revenues from ticketing, and you can see that despite the pandemic, January and February are comparable, for example, to October or November, and you have more than 1 million Hungarian forint more revenues each month, and almost sure that partly because of the new network and much better service. A very short part, I would partly skip it. It's an on-demand public transport service in Zalaegerszeg, the Western Transdanubian region, quite far from Budapest. We developed them the SUMP in 2016, and then we planned a bus network, a new bus network, but it hasn't been implemented, unfortunately, even not yet. But that time we defined the need of demand responsive mobility solutions on hilly areas where you don't have any public transport service, but you have to walk a lot to get a bus. And the idea was that Zalaegerszeg, the name of Zalaegerszeg is a quite long name, and many people abbreviate it or has the abbreviation ZEG, Z-E-G. And we defined the service name Zerge based on Zeg and Zalaegerszeg. And Zerge means chamois, the little hilly animal, which doesn't live in Zalaegerszeg, by the way, but people started to love this name. And under the SharePlace Interact project, together with some other cities and consultants or planners, we could implement 2 testing periods for these hilly areas. It was a quite good planning together with the population, with the inhabitants. We made test trips with them and we identified the problems. And we did, as mentioned, 2 testing periods by the end or second part of November 2019, before COVID. And we had more than 2,000 users during 6 or 7 weeks of operation on 3 lines. And we had 7 departures per line on weekdays and 4 departures on weekends with 2 buses of 15 places. We didn't use stops, we used stop points. It was very easy to implement. And you can see we developed, I think, a very well visualized and nice design for the lines with timetable, with all the information, how to register, how to book to the services, and people were really, really satisfied. So we could bring a lot of new passengers, and it was a quite good system. And for the second test, by autumn 2020, we developed one more line, bigger vehicles, and during the COVID, we had less passengers, but it was really a bad period from that point of view in terms of public transport needs and requests. So the third project I would like to show you, it's a network and timetable planning in Oradea. We did this work for Oferă, Oradea Transport Local. We had some preliminary activities. We worked for Oferă in 2013 and 14 because we identified that there are no timetables for the tramways, there are only frequencies. So the operation is day by day different, depending a lot on the dispatcher's activities. So you cannot really predict your journey, you cannot really predict your interchanges. So that means the journey time is quite different. Since that, there were a lot of development, a network, that the fleet management system, also the e-ticketing. So it was a very, very good basis for a further planning. And we wanted to build on a new public transport or tramway transport network and timetable scheme. We analyzed a lot of data we got from the e-ticketing and traffic management system, and we developed several network versions for discussing and later for further planning. And we developed timetable concepts for the network versions. If you know the Oradea tramway system, it's a quite complex, even more in the city has a new line, even making the network more complex. So it's always the question to have more direct transversal connections, or the classic, which is actually the case, loop-based connections, or a mixed one. So you can see the three different approaches in this on this figure. We created 6 main versions and a lot of sub-versions, and selected 2 for further planning. You can see on the on this screen for now. Different network philosophy, different line structure, and different timetable structure. What we wanted is to create a very well harmonized system. So to avoid that you have a certain stop, for example, you have 3 tramway lines there, and you have the 3 tramways passing or going in 2 minutes, and after you have to wait 15 or 20 minutes. So it was a really complex optimizing, planning, and compromise searching project, because in such a complex network, you had to find some compromises in certain parts of the network. But we could develop, I think, a quite good system, which is synchronized. You can plan the interchanges. There are interval-based timetables, for example, 10 or 20 minutes. In some versions, we had 12 or 24, but I don't recommend it. And the late evenings, you have 15 or 30 minutes frequencies, but as the lines are harmonized, you can have very attractive waiting times. So we made a modeling again, and we could show it and visualize for Oferă experts and leaders, and also for the municipality, how these tramways are moving in virtual reality. And it's very easy and visual to explain how is it working. So we would like to consider that after some reconstructions that are actually in Oradea, this tramway network and timetable system would be further planned, because it needs some more refining and deeper planning, and also creating the schedules and so-called rostering. But I hope that it will be implemented. We would be happy to continue it. And it's really important to attract the passengers, and we collected a lot of activities how to do it. And my last example will be a Bulgarian example from the city of Ruse, which is a city very close to the Romanian border on the other side of the Danube, just in face of Giurgiu. And Ruse is a quite developed city from public transport perspective. And we worked for the city in 18 and 19 before the pandemic. And we developed a complete system which renewed the public transport in terms of buses and trolleybuses. Because the case was that there was a competition among the buses and trolleybuses, and it's a sort of cannibalism in favor of the revenues against the users. So again, a competition was between urban and suburban traffic, and there was an unhealthy hierarchy of trolleybuses and buses, because buses were very fast, trolleybuses were really slow, but these were the capacity vehicles. So we identified a lot of network and timetable problems, also for the passenger information system and the vehicle conditions. And we recommended some improvements how to work on the development of the status of the public transport and on the value judgment of the public transport. So we did a quite long, more than 1 year long planning process, starting with an analysis, passenger counting. We developed a couple of alternatives and scenarios, and together with the local representatives, experts, NGOs, citizens, we went through to a selection of the variants or scenarios for further planning. And finally, we developed a public transport scheme, which is just a scheme actually, but it needs refining. And if we want, or if the city wants to implement it, many extra or additional activities will be needed or would be needed. So what we did, there are much better connections from neighborhoods to the center and to workplace areas. Also, we developed express lines. We strengthened a lot the trolleybus network and strengthened the buses where there is no trolleybus system. So it's now, or in the plans, it's more healthy splitting of tasks between trolleybuses and the buses. And we extended the service time from earlier morning to later evening. We developed the interval-based timetables for each line and for groups of lines. Groups of lines mean, for example, 2 trolleybus lines which are operating together on 80% or 85% of their line. After there is maybe a crossing and one line goes to point A, one line goes to, the other goes to point B. And we made a new numbering of the lines, and it's absolutely a well-working system upon the model. So it was really, really important how to make a better coverage in the city, and better frequencies. And also we introduced new sections for the trolleybus and a lot of new sections for the buses. So you can see we used an interval-based timetable system, so it's repeating. It's more or less, yeah, it was almost completely symmetric. So it's very easy to plan interchanges, waiting times, and connections to other public transport modes. So this was for the trolleybus, and this is for the buses. You can see the screen of the modeling, and we also modified the system to increase the importance of the trolleybuses and change the use of buses in other regions. And also for buses, we developed interval-based timetables, good synchronization, and also harmonization between trolleybuses and buses. So we wanted to cut back the competition of these public transport modes. So these four projects I wanted to select for you, because I think these are quite practical and make a complementary side of what Vanessa showed us before me. And I really hope that you could get some points which are interesting. I'm happy to answer your questions, and we are absolutely open to cooperate of cities in Romania or operators or authorities if you think it's useful. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, András. We already have a question in chat. I will translate it. Which of the examples did you find most difficult, and why?
Nice question, because all of them had difficulties. I would say that maybe the most difficult was in Nyíregyháza, the first one, because it was completely implemented. So we behaved, let's say, as a shadow authority. So we tried to have the municipality, we tried to have the operator, Volambus, we cooperated very well. But if you implement it and it's working, you will get feedbacks. And we got feedbacks, usually people complain, I don't like it, I hate it. I would be able to tell other issues too, but they are not happy many times. What we got in Nyíregyháza, of course, there were some questions that why this bus was shifted away from 10 minutes or why this line has changed like that. We got a lot of positive messages that we are really grateful. Thank you very much. It helped us a lot. This new network is much better for us, or the new frequencies. It's very difficult sometimes to consider the frameworks you have. I mean, you have 72 buses you can operate in peak hours in the morning. You have a certain capping on the kilometer, on the yearly capacities. And you have to shift them and you have to make a balance. And if you want to do something here, you have to solve in the other parts of the cities, because you cannot cut back the service, but maybe with a better harmonization, you are able to tackle problems. So for example, from the 18th of June, we will have a new line, which was really asked, a new connection, which was really asked by users. But this new line will be synchronized on all sections with others. So it's not an extra capacity, but it's a much better splitted capacity, or much better used capacity, let's say. And it was not easy sometimes, for example, in Russe, because the operational habits and culture were completely different. And also the financing situation was very, very poor, unfortunately. And we had to start the communication process from a different level, because, for example, we had to explain sometimes that if you have a trolleybus, you are not obliged to use that vehicle the whole day on the same line, producing a lot of unproductive times. But if you, for example, you have 5 trolleybuses, 5 vehicles for 2 lines, it can be really optimized instead of using 3 on one line, 3 on one line and 3 on the other line. You would need 6 trolleybuses, but with 5 we can do it very well and in an optimized and synchronized way. But you have to change from one line to another, and it was not a habit in Russe. It was something very absolutely unused. Also in the city of Siófok, however, it's a very, very small system. It was very difficult to explain that with the same number of buses, so 6 buses, you can operate a service on the coastal area of the Balaton. Instead of every hour, you can do it every 30 minutes, and you won't need more buses, but you will use the buses in a much more efficient way, of course, within the limits of working regulations. So it was absolutely okay, but it meant that it was not the case anymore that you drive 30 minutes and you have a rest of 30 minutes, but you have driven for 50 minutes and you had to wait. You had a coffee break for 10 minutes, and it's a new culture.
This is my question now. Do you communicate with people living in a city when you start a project there? Do you explain to them what users and non-users of the public transport, what is going to happen, or do you advise the municipality or the public transport operator to communicate with them? Because you said in Nyíregyháza you had so good feedback. I imagine that people understood what's going on in their city, and that's why it was this very positive feedback.
Apparently, Violetta, it's a simple question, and I would say yes, of course, and always, but it's a bit more complex because in Nyíregyháza, it was the beginning of the pandemic when we started to change to a temporary network, and it was very well communicated, but the temporary network led us to the new network. So there was no return to the old-fashioned one. And that's why people saw very easily the differences. At that time, what we did, it was a lot of different communication actions, mainly online, but also in other cities where we developed SUMPs, and also we developed bus networks and service upgrading. We could make online surveys. I think Otella did something similar because we discussed before with colleagues about online surveys. It's very easy to fill in because we asked about main problems, main needs, main opinions, and ideas, avoiding too much free texts because you will get complete romance or I mean complete long texts or novels and sometimes very hard texts, but to make selections that you can choose yes or not, or a scale from 1 to 4, not 1 to 5, because if 1 to 5, many people will take on 3. Okay, not bad, not good, but okay, 3. But if you have 1 to 4, you have to choose that it's more positive or more negative. Anyway, so we got a lot of feedbacks, and we also asked, what would you say if this line or groups of line would go on that way or that way? And we got a lot of feedbacks. And also during SUMPs, we did it not only online, but offline too. We asked on buses, we made surveys and counting on vehicles and stops, or there were boxes in main centers like municipalities, hospitals, shopping center, and so on, where you could drop in the filled-in questionnaire. Also, you could get it in the local newspaper, and you could cut it and drop in, or find the internet availability of, I mean, the link. So this kind of planning with the citizens is always really important, but sometimes nobody wants to finance it. I'm telling it as a private company managing director that it's something like extra cost. Okay, let's plan and it will work somehow, but I disagree. So we have to use a lot of we have to create a lot of activities to involve citizens in this planning process, because they have to understand it. They will hate it if you don't include them in the planning process. And if they can show their interest and their needs, for example, in Nyíregyháza, we have a common online Excel sheet with the operator and the authority and Mobilissimus, and we see, absolutely considering GDPR, but we see all passenger requests and complaints which belong to us. So if there is a delay of 2 minutes, it's an operational issue, it's not for us. But for example, when they have some need that a connection is not well planned, or they need an extra trip late evening or something like this, we can check it, and we always analyze, and we prepare the answer what the municipality or the authority should send back to the user. And most of the time we consider and we answer and we solve these needs, and it's really important. And for example, it's just I would say a fun fact that 2 weeks ago, maybe, or one, a colleague of mine showed me a Facebook page of Nyíregyháza. It's a group page there that somebody had a very strong sentence on the bus service. I wouldn't quote it because it's not a polite sentence, but you can imagine. And at the end, they named me, or she named me, and the planner never went to Nyíregyháza. He is from Budapest, and he is called András EKÉS. And so that's me. And the colleague of mine showed that, have you seen it? I thought, no, I haven't seen it, but it's really impolite. And usually we don't answer these, because if you answer, it starts like an avalanche, and it will be stronger and stronger. But I answered it in a very polite way that, dear lady, thanks for your contribution, but without any concrete issue, we cannot help you. Please write to the info at volambus.hu. Your problem will be transmitted for us. We will analyze it, and if possible, we will improve the case. And she never answered after, but another wrote that I did it, and it really helped us. So it was a very positive feedback finally, not from that lady. But I know that people are really frustrated, and I don't consider serious that somebody is unhappy. And there might be sometimes real problems because there are traffic jams and delays, not because of timetables, because of the high number of cars. But we really try to solve the problem. And the operator is not interested in it. And sometimes the authority is not really focusing on that due to lack of skills or capacities. So that's why I think this gap we try to fill in, it's really important.
Okay, I have another question. Buses or trolley buses or trams, which one do you think it's more suitable in city in general?
You should also mention e-buses. I think that where you have a trolley bus system, it's a really high value. And I never recommend to change trolley buses to e-buses, because you have a zero emission solution, and you can use also e-buses on trolley bus. I mean, you can use, for example, like in some Czech cities, e-buses with trolley bus pantographs on common sections, and you can recharge it while going. So I like very much trolley bus system because I think it's efficient, and with this autonomous mode, you can go maybe 15 kilometers far from the classic overhead system. Tramway it's my favorite, but it's not. It's up after a certain passenger demand. So it's again the question: if you have a tramway system, it's a value. You have to improve it and procure new vehicles or second-hand vehicles, but in a good status. And I think that as it's capacitive, you can increase frequencies. You have enormous capacity for a tramway, and if you make the priority for buses, trolleybuses, tramways, you can really create an attractive system. And I didn't mention, but it's really important to make the integration of services, integration of ticketing, and the integration of also the timetables. So it really depends, Violetta, on the given city or functional urban area.
Thank you. Thank you very much. If there are any other questions, if not, we are close to the final of this webinar. So thank you very much, András. I will switch a little bit to Romanian. Vă mulțumesc pentru participare. Deja este ora 4:30. Ne apropiem de momentul despărțirii. Vă reamintesc că în luna iunie CIVINET România organizează încă 2 activități. Prima online, un training de 2 zile pentru studenți, proaspeți absolvenți și tineri care lucrează în domeniul mobilității urbane sau sunt interesați de mobilitate urbană. Pentru studenți și proaspeți absolvenți și chiar și pentru tinerii interesați de mobilitate urbană nu este nevoie să aibă cunoștințe teoretice în acest domeniu. Subiectul acestui training, care se va desfășura în 23-24 iunie, este incluziune și accesibilitate în spațiu public. Mâine vom porni înscrierile, deci urmăriți canalele de social media, Facebook și LinkedIn ale CIVINET România. Și în 28 iunie ne întâlnim la București într-un eveniment fizic organizat de Civitas și EIT Urban Mobility, un workshop de incubare pentru soluții de mobilitate urbană inovatoare. Vor fi câțiva reprezentanți al unor startup-uri din Europa care au dezvoltat cu sprijinul EIT Urban Mobility diverse astfel de soluții și vor prezenta soluțiile, iar cei interesați vor avea ocazia să aibă o discuție unul cu ei sau cu soluțiile care prezintă cel mai mare interes pentru dumneavoastră. Pentru acest workshop mai sunt deschise înscrierile astăzi și mâine și pentru asta am să vă rog pe cei interesați să îmi trimiteți un mail la civinet-romania@civitas.eu. Acestea fiind spuse, încă o dată vă mulțumesc, vă urez o după-amiază plăcută și ne întâlnim, sper, fie la trainingul Future Leaders, fie la București, la workshop-ul de incubare. O zi bună! Thank you, András, once again. Have a lovely afternoon and good luck in your projects. Bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me and good luck for the continuation. And I'm always happy to cooperate with you and with Romanian CIVINET.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.